Bonsoir à tous. Donc, nous avons le plaisir, donc bonsoir Giacomo. Donc, nous avons le plaisir ce soir d'accueillir Giacomo Borella pour cette nouvelle conférence du cycle Reconstruction, Déconstruction que nous organisons toujours avec Boris Amzeyan, qui est enseignant en histoire des techniques à l'école. Donc, pour rappel, ce cycle explore diverses approches contemporaines de la construction en interrogeant et réinventant les pratiques architecturales à travers des solutions alternatives. Donc, le travail de Giacomo Borella interroge profondément les fondements culturels, politiques et matériels de l'architecture contemporaine. Je suis particulièrement heureux de l'accueillir aujourd'hui parce que j'ai eu la chance de visiter le studio Albori lors d'un voyage à Milan il y a 6 ans. Une visite qui m'a marqué, qui m'a permis de découvrir le travail de studio Albori avec un grand enthousiasme. Giacomo est diplômé du Polytechnique de Milano. Après avoir travaillé avec Alvaro Siza, puis Umberto Riva, il a fondé le studio Albori en 1993 avec Francesca Riva et Emanuele Almagioni. L'agence accorde une attention toute particulière aux questions énergétiques, mais dans une réflexion plus large sur la question de l'habitat du quotidien. Giacomo est également écrivain, et sa pensée d'architecte est nourrie par les philosophes et des penseurs radicaux comme Ivan Illich, Colin Ward ou Pierre Kropotkin. Dans le livre Il Muoto Appoggio, un fattore dell'evoluzione, qui a été écrit en 1902 et traduit récemment, propose une anthropologie de la coopération entre les êtres vivants, humains et animaux. Loin de la vision dominante fondée sur la compétition, Kropotkin y développe une vision éthique de l'aide mutuelle active, considérée comme un facteur fondamental de l'évolution et un principe fondateur des sociétés humaines dont nous avons besoin aujourd'hui plus que jamais. Donc, le studio Albori est souvent qualifié de laboratoire de construction. Les architectes participent directement à la fabrication du bâti, un aspect fondamental de leur démarche de projet. Leur travail s'inscrit donc dans une tentative plus large de réactivation, donc réactivation des ressources négligées, des formes de vie alternatives, des manières de bâtir qui résistent aux logiques dominantes. J'ai été par exemple particulièrement marqué par la narration autour du projet du hangar Bikoka, qui sera présenté ce soir d'ailleurs, qui permettait à un même ensemble d'éléments constructifs de vivre plusieurs vies, à l'image des corps humains, d'abord comme espace de conférence, puis comme école. J'ai été aussi touché par une phrase que Giacomo a citée dans une interview d'Edoardo Di Filippo, « Chi cerca la forma trova la morta, et chi cerca la vita trova la forma ». Donc, qui cherche la forme trouve la mort, et qui cherche la vie trouve la forme. À travers la présentation de projets récents, Giacomo Borella nous invite à reconsidérer les débris de modernité, non comme des pertes ou des déchets, mais comme des matériaux porteurs d'histoire, de potentiel et d'un imaginaire architectural renouvelé. Merci d'accueillir chaleureusement Giacomo Borella.
Merci beaucoup, Marc. I'm really sorry not being able to speak in French. It's horrible that in Italian to speak to French people had need to pass through the English language, but so it goes. I'm particularly grateful for this invitation because it's also an occasion for me to be here in Saint-Étienne, as I think that small, medium French cities are, for me, one of the highest point of civilization, and so I'm happy to have the occasion to walk and pedal, because I brought my little folding bicycle from Milan in the streets of Saint-Étienne. The title. I made the effort of translating it also in French. It works more or less in two senses. One in a broader sense, because we can say that our work has to do with this kind of use or dealing with the debris of modernity in the sense of techniques, materials, resources, tools, behaviors that modern project has neglected or discarded as obsolete. And there is also a more literal sense, because our works often tries to include the materials, leftovers, and detritus of modernity in the building process. I must say also that, as Mark already said, that our office, from one side, is a quite normal one, but from the other, try to mix also the manual labor with our hands on the work to the normal design work. Let's start with a simple coincidence, that is that this text by one of my heroes, Ivan Illich, was written in 1993, just when we were starting to work as a Studio Albori, so many years ago. And he was speaking of something similar to the title we chosen for this lecture. No matter where you travel, the landscape is recognizable. All over the world, it is cluttered with cooling towers and parking lots, agribusiness and megacities. But now that the development is ending, Earth was the wrong planet for this kind of construction. The growth projects are rapidly turning into ruins, into junk, among which we must learn to live. This thing of learning to live among the ruins, the junk of the growth project of modernity, is more or less the condition I think Studio Albori find in himself, itself. So we, at that age, when we started, we were quite young, was probably the beginning of the time in which many people were starting to understand that, putting it in a schematic way, that modern architecture was collaborating to produce the unbalance of the biosphere, was collaborating to the global warming process and all this kind of ecological collapses. So our work with Studio Albori from the beginning slowly was called to put into question the certainties of modernity, and is more or less what we are continuing to do. I'm not going to do an excursus of all the decades of our work, but only choosing some project about quite in a random way, in which you will find some of these ingredients accordingly with the differences of the single different occasion. This is a project for a riding center and some houses, the house of the owners, and some houses for holidays. In I think almost all the projects I'm going to show are in Italy. This is This is near Lake Garda in province of Verona. And is a large field, and the scheme of the settlement is very elemental. Is a kind of necklace with all the pieces put on the edge, of the external edge of the field. On the left, the part more for human being, on the right, the part for more for horses. The buildings are four buildings built in with a timber frame filled with straw bales. And for example, you can start to see here that this practice of reuse of leftovers of discarded materials, it take a dimension every time different. Sometimes it's only a kind of try, a kind of insertion in a quite normal work, and sometimes goes to be until being the wool of the project that is completely done with recovered materials. In this case, the only part that is about the reuse of components are the window frames and door frames. And if you see, if you look at them, you can notice that they are all of different material, colors, and shape. And the thing came when we discovered that the joiners, the window makers, also do sometimes some error. And so in their warehouses, there are many windows and doors that are not used because they took wrongly the measurements, or they had arguments with clients, or something went wrong. So the only way, as you can't cut a piece of window, to use them is to include them from the beginning with their dimensions in a catalog with which you start to do the project from the beginning. So taking from the catalog the existing windows and doors and putting in your project. This is a part of the catalog that we were collecting without having a proper structure of collection of materials. So it was something that we always did in a very wild way. The other materials that in some way is a discarded material, is a leftover, is the straw. That is a secondary produce, is a byproduct of cereal growth, crop. And this is the moment of the putting within the structure of the straw bales. This is a section of how is organized this system, this building system. In this case, for trying to save some money for the client, was an experiment to leave the board, the plank of larch at site. Normally you see this kind of oblique planks, wooden planks, in the rough phase of the construction, and then there is a final layer of the facade. This inclination of the planks has also structural purpose, because it's for bracing the prefabricated component. The two of the buildings has a arrangement and the section that comes straight from a thermal origin. This one is the house of the owners and is built with this hot nucleus built in material fireproof bricks, the kind of central core. Then there is the external wall that is made in timber structure and straw, and then there is the pitch of the roof that is also treated with grass. And you can see it in the, I don't know where is the, probably here. This is the nucleus, the hot nucleus. In fact, actually there are two nucleus in this house, because there are two stove with the recycle of the smoke that goes and bend many times to keep all the hot part of the vapor of the smoke, and the smoke goes out at the end almost cold, and all the warmth is given to the internal space. And you see here the stove with a cat. This is the external, this visible part of the stove, but you find pieces of the channeling of the hot air in every room. The mortar, the plaster in this building is made in clay. And also this building that is completely different is the little building of the riding center, has the same thermal section, central core, central hot core, the external straw perimeter, and the roof. And this is the plan with the core, and this is the section that you can see even more clearly. In this case, there is also a interaction with the hot air, with the solar water panel. So the hot air collaborates to warm the water in the solar panel. The interiors of this little pavilion, where you can spot all the old discarded materials, and the colors of the grass on the roof that changes in the seasons. Here you can see together, very close one to another, the three different kind of windows in the same kind of bow window space. And here you can see the different kind of window frames, and also I would say, ugly one that here wasn't yet painted, but there is, in this strategy, there is space to incorporate also things that are not particularly nice. One of the buildings for a room for holidays, and there are these elements called in Italian gelosie that are very simple but very sophisticated tools for regulation of thermal interaction between outside and inside, and apparently very appreciated by cats. And there is also this natural swimming pool that consists of a kind of large box made in large wood that is like a sunk boat that is completely under water, and divide the part of the pool where people stay from the part that is regenerating through the plants, the water. Another project, much smaller, with some ingredients that are similar to the previous one, and is also on another lake on the north of Italy, which is this time Lake Maggiore, is this little house made also in timber and straw bales, which is actually a substitution of this very beautiful house that we at the beginning tried to restore, to recover, but at the end was too damaged and too expensive to keep it. And this is the lake, so is in the middle of this village called Laveno on the east shore, raised up, so with a nice view to the lake. It was the old house. With this, as you see, this house was cut in two parts. One was completely squeezed and close to the existing villa, and the other was exposed to the sun and to the view of the lake. And from this part, this is the beautiful view. And the project should obey to this strange regulation that authorized to build a new volume, but respecting absolutely strictly the dimension and the measures of the existing one. So this is the plan inserted in this particularly urban situation. Is like the little house was parked in the middle of a little square. And this is the house, also with a large wood structure. This time the structure was left at site and was plastered, the facade, leaving the structure at site. Also here, this practice of collecting window frames around north of Italy, and in this case, there is also the recover of the most we could. So roof tiles of the existing of the old little building, roof tiles, steps, stone steps, parapets, and other pieces also coming from outside, like this gate and other. The original project wanted to reuse all these hexagonal tiles that were paving all the first floor of the old house. And so the project had this part with these tiles that we were using for protecting this side that in the old house hadn't a jetting roof, and so we had to rebuild as it was, so with this roof without any cantilevering elements, and so wasn't protected. And for a building in straw bales, this could be not good, and so we thought to reuse these tiles to protect this side, but was rejected by local authorities, and so we changed it in a second time, again with the same tiles, but with another pattern that was copied by an existing house from the other side of the lake. So at that time, the second time was approved. This is the moment in which they were building the foundation, our foundation without any concrete, metal gabions filled with stones. This is the structure, and through the structure, the view of the lake. The moment of teaching to the constructors how to fill the structure with straw bales. The structure has been designed bespoke for the dimension of straw bales, of course. This was is I think one of the few photographs we have of the house before was made a coupe, and where all the different colors of salvaged windows have been unified in the same brown color by the owners. The north side of the house, facing this micro square, and this section of the new house that in some way reproduce this division in two parts. The one that see the lake and the sun, where there are the living spaces with the mezzanine here, and the other where there are the staircase and the two bathrooms that can be, for Italian regulation, can be shorter, and so we could arrange another little room on top. The part of the house that look the lake reuse the parapets of the old house, and also here there is another trick, because there was made an objection that the old parapet were not guaranteeing the present regulation that is that you don't have more than 10 centimeters between two elements. And so having we plenty of this parapet, because the new balcony is shorter than the old one, we put in 2 layers the parapets to reduce the space between the vertical elements. And unfortunately, at the end, there was a kind of rebellion of the builder allied with the owners, and they didn't want to put on the hexagonal tiles, and they said that they were being dispersed. They couldn't find any more of them in the warehouse of the builders. So at the end, no hexagonal tiles, and the fact that we were accustomed to this factor that there were being some kind of figurative elements on the facades was at the end substituted by this kind of little graffiti that we made in this tile. These tiles are coming also from the warehouse of the builders, not clear from which other building, but we made some of this graffiti in some tiles and are almost invisible. You must wait the moment of the day where the sun has the right inclination. These are the former steps of the old house. This is the gate coming from another place, and a couple of images of the interiors, the view to the lake. And another work that is older, probably almost 15 years ago, is a restaurant in Milan, completely made with salvaged materials, where we meet for the first time members of this funny family of crates, of big wooden boxes for the transportation of artworks that were at that time for many years they were sitting in the warehouse of the builder of the previous project. There were many big crates, dimension like 3 by 3 meters, and we started this project. They are the boxes made bespoke for the artworks of the collection of this museum in Varese, Villa Panza, that collect important works of minimal art, American art of the 60s and the 70s. And we started in this small project that we made completely with our hands to use some of these crates for producing this kind of furniture collage, or this like this. For the rest, the project used a lot of a stock of cardboard tubes coming from the plotter, from the prints of the large dimensions, to do this counter ceiling and other pieces like these windows coming from other demolitions and other elements. And this restaurant in the last 15 years changed many times because they changed their mind, they changed needs, and so they called us more or less every year to do some to add some piece, to change some other, and these are other pieces made with leftovers of the crates, like this bench. These benches are made with other like leftovers, like these drawers founded on the sidewalk in Milan. Another little part of the restaurant that we made some years later. And during the COVID, the pandemic, some external temporary spaces that actually are still there. A little shop, this is not in Italy because it's in Croatia, in Istria. A little shop made with other pieces found in the same warehouse of this strange builder on Lake Maggiore. These were pieces of an installation of this museum. This strange triangular pieces of wood painted of white in two sides. And this shop is a clothes shop in Rovinj in Croatia, is made mainly with these triangular pieces of wood. And other pieces, these are lid of wine boxes for doing these shelves, and the others are leftovers of the crates, and the lighting is done with these tins. Few years later, about 10 years ago, another work that is not in Italy is this temporary construction in Chicago in 2015 for the first biennial of architecture. Having to do this construction for 4 or 5 months, we made a kind of agreement with one of these very interesting organization that began after the subprime crisis in 2008, where in the US there were enormous part of cities that were practically abandoned. There were tons of materials to be dismantled, and many of these organizations flourished in many cities. In Chicago there are 4 or 5 of them that dismantle buildings and organize the selling of second-hand building materials. The name of this one is Rebuilding Exchange. So we did an agreement with them, and these are their spaces, very fascinating. You see here, for example, the sector of doors. To rent a stock of materials for 4 months, and included in this little contract we did, there was the dismantling at the end of our installation of the materials that should return to the warehouse as third-hand materials. And this is our construction, an indoor construction in the Chicago Cultural Center. Was a installation for doing music with 3 or 4 micro stages suspended in the empty parts of this monumental staircase, and was an homage to the tradition of a musical improvisation in Chicago, and in itself an exercise in improvisation in architecture. That is something that has a very long tradition in popular architecture, but is something that is almost forgotten today. Was needed the aspect of the improvisation because we had to invent something with the materials that we booked online by telephone at the distance. And so we brought with us our engineer, that is this one, that is able to calculate in lifetime the structure with the materials founded on the spot. And this is the photograph they sent us when we went there to build everything, but of course we came back and they dismantled the materials at the end. A few time after, another little work in Rovinj, in Croatia, the same place where was the shop, because they needed a kind of pop-up shop to put in a hall of a horrible hotel. And so is 2 boxes, 2 crates of the family of the same dimension, put in a way of being an inopenable box in the morning, every morning, to be open all the accessories, the little desk, the shelves, and then in the evening to be closed. This is I think in 2016, was an invitation to design something for this Triennale in Milan at the Hangar Bicocca. And was something to be built in the external part of this big hangar. And it was here, but was a kind of, they called it garden, but was a kind of parking plot. And the idea was to not having here the possibility of doing the same that we did in Chicago, of renting materials. We tried to do the project in a way that could be reassembled in another shape for another purpose, but I would say it better for the logistic of the timing of the project. At the end, we decided firstly the end shape of when the project should be rebuilt as a pavilion serving as a class for teaching Italian to foreigners and refugees. And then we dismantled the design of this final purpose into a mid-term solution for the pavilion for the exhibition, which is this, is again made, this time almost completely with the famous family of crates. The only part that was prepared bespoke for the final version are these trusses. This is the final, it should be the final pavilion, very simple with a kind of also open air class on top. And this is the installation at the Triennale, where you see that the crates are used also for the same time for both for vertical structures and for roof, part of the roof. The structure was meant to provide some shade in a place where there isn't much shade, and some place to stay, to rest, with a lot of benches. And as the exhibition was in the hot season, with together with the shade also many fan on the pending of the roof. The crates coming from the Lake Maggiore, the preparation of all the elements, and the construction on site. This is the porch, call it porch, where the crates have been consolidated with other elements to be bearing structural elements, but are empty. In the second version, they should be filled with straw and, of course, completed with membrane and things. Of course, as you see, the trusses here are used in a kind of not proper way. And the pavilion has been used for different occasions, like presentation of book, like here, or simply for people that stroll around this place that is free, has a free entrance, and so is frequented by families and people until midnight. The covering of the crates of the roof were coming from another dismantling in another work site in Piedmont that we were refurbishing this building, and is fiber cement without asbestos. There is also a little acrobatic collection of rainwater, not for collecting properly, but only for bringing it in a safe place without going on the people visiting. The dismantling of this construction, and after a series of failures, this pavilion that I showed wasn't built. After some years, with the difficulty of keeping all the material stored in a place in Milan, the last occasion was to build a building here that should, at its time, recover and transform some existing building built without permission many years ago. This should be a place for association, but it was a building made for the municipality, so public property. And this is the main pavilion that was completely redesigned with the same materials. This is a piece that is survived from the existing local construction, transformed into public bathrooms, and a kitchen, and the other two construction, like a kitchen and a little space for offices. This is the part that was kept of the existing building. And these are some sketches of the project. That is, as you saw, it was put in a particularly beautiful place between two lakes in a park in Milan, where there were these cave for the digging of the gravel. how it is now and how it should be, with the two lakes visible from the top of this kind of terrace on top of the building, one and the other. The building, this project has a sad story because the first time it has been passed through a very troublesome bureaucratic path, and there were 22 permissions to be collected, and the main one, the office of the municipality that should then manage the building, the first their statement was particularly enthusiastic, saying at the end of a project that practices the famous circular economy and all this thing. So we moved all the materials from a farm south of Milan to the place where the building should be built, but then arrived a kind of addendum of the same statement saying, perfect, we confirm the previous statement, so the project is approved, but with an addendum, which is simply that the building should be built only with new materials. So, at the end, the materials are there from 5 or 6 years, because everything, no, 4 or 5 years was during the COVID, and are rotting. The part that is surviving of the famous family of the crates intersects in some way this other project. That is a project about this casale, about this rural house in the hills of Lazio, east of Rome, and is a complex of building that was in this condition 3 years ago. Very beautiful, and the operation that was needed consisted mainly in two categories. One was to insulate the roof that was already insulated with 10 centimeters of polystyrene, that is very horrible materials, very used in buildings market, but is very bad for insulation against hot climate. And so the project was to take off the polystyrene from the roof and use it for the contact with the floor, with the ground. So this one operation that produced this, that was also the occasion for consolidating, doing the anti-seismic implementation of the existing structure. So this is the new insulation in straw bale and the new beams that works together with the existing beams underneath. And this operation produced a series of stripes in plaster that were more or less the parts that were damaged of the old plaster, or the parts that were produced by this of this elevation of the thickness of the roof, of the insulation. And so there is this try to embellish this new part of plaster, of lime plaster, with some graffiti that also here are almost invisible. For example, there are graffiti here and here. Perhaps you see some circles here, but you must wait the right moment of the day to see them for some short time. For example, this kind of net pattern or this other. And the second operation that was needed there was simply the construction of internal walls, because the house was probably left during a try of refurbishment many years before, in which they demolished any internal wall. So it's here that the leftovers of the family of crates come back again to us, because we needed to empty this last garage where they were stored. And so we proposed to these friends that were the owners of these houses to use all these elements to do the internal walls, doing a kind of series of collage. You see here all the walls that were produced by the given elements. The elements were filled with wood fiber and with a membrane, and are mainly at the end toilets. This is the internal side of the toilets. This is another one. This is another one built, suspended, but built on top of this existing parapet of this existing staircase. And this is a system of walls that creates two bathroom, a mezzanine, and a small room, a corridor. And with the leftovers of the leftovers of the leftovers of course, I'm referring to these frames that were the frames that were inside the crates to keep, to brace the canvas of the artworks. We made, together with the owners that has a small publishing company and silk screen printing workshop, so they need a lot of space for their books. We made these bookshelves. And as you see, also here, the many other elements are coming from salvaged ones. And you see here from the fact that the opening has a dimension and the wind and the door frame has another dimension. And this is our main supplier, that is a junk seller of the place, where we bought also these elements that are old parapets or pieces of gates for doing these parapets. And other salvaged things are all leftovers, are this flooring of the terraces that is made with the leftovers of the internal floors of these very rough tiles that has been used for doing these terraces. This was the structure part of this group of houses of a shed that was demolished by the constructor the first day. And so we did an exercise of reconstruction with the same elements for rebuilding a shed for the photovoltaic panels. where the old elements has been coupled for getting the resistance that was needed by the engineer. The last two things I think that I want to show you, this is not a project of us, but made by my students in Mendrisio. I teach at the Academia of Architecture in Mendrisio in Switzerland. And this is the work we made in the last two semesters, last year and the previous year. The students do a design and build work, working on this ruin that is a ruin of a rural building owned by the municipality that was in this state 2 years ago, and the work was to transform it in collaboration with the municipality in a public open space. The difficult was doing the master plan, the general project all together in 25, but then this was the first semester. The idea was to have this, to construct this big tent, like a circus one, and with many structural elements cut from local wood coming from the management of the forests, discarded sails from the lake near Lake Como, discarded materials leftovers from marble cellars, and with the fragments of roof tiles, that was the old roof tiles that was insisting there from the rural use, we have broken all the fragments into a very fine powder mixed with the grassello of lime. We produced this coccio pesto, that is a very ancient technique for waterproofing tanks and cisterne and things. And this is a collecting pool for the rain water coming on top of the covering. This is the work we did the first year, but was very frail, very fragile in realization. The weather was very strong. Also the kind of people that used to stay in this place, there was a lot of vandalism. And so at the end, after 1 year, was in this condition. And so our work, the year, next year was to redo almost, not everything, but mainly the roof, the cover. And the materials came from this demolition that was few hundred meters away. And this is the an operation of putting straight these pillars that were squint, that were pending by 30 centimeters. And so we cut it at the base, the pillars. We pushed with ropes and puntelli, and we inserted some special concrete with the controlled retirement. And this is one of our main suppliers, the local dump. A part of the roof, the group decided to be done in palustial reeds, and so we went to cut on the hills these reeds. The cacio pesto was refreshed, and this is the result of the second semester. The roof tiles were bought for 50 francs on internet, obviously second-hand, and many of the things you see are things already built in the first edition but repaired and transformed. This is the part made in reeds, and this is the thing that students painted in the internal side of the tiles. And these are the implementation of the structure we needed. Passing from the first solution to the second solution was a good exercise to calculate with the engineers what these elements needed to have added for bearing the new load. And the rest of the tiles was grinded to become a kind of gravel, a cotto gravel. And this is chipped wood. And this is a game that serves also to oxygenate the water, the metabolic energy produced pedaling these discarded bicycles, pump the water in this tube, and the water goes on this tank and is on the model of the Japanese Shishiodoshi, I think is the name, is a how's the name for spaventapasseri, for a scary somebody that you put on the fields when you grow the crop. You put this kind of, how do you call it in French? Scarecrow in English. I don't know in French how is. Okay, so is a Japanese scarecrow that works, that you feel, when you get the certain amount of water, this tank turns and produces a sound and a little fall of water. The last project was is completely done exclusively with leftovers, and was the Vatican Pavilion at the Venice Biennale of the last Venice Biennale 2 years ago, on the island of San Giorgio in Venice, in front of Piazza San Marco. Not on this Palladian part of the complex, but in the more humble part of this courtyard. The invitation was to design and realize a vegetable garden, a temporary vegetable garden for 6 months here, as a kind of homage to, or interpretation to the encyclical letters Laudato Si, that has this radical position about the care of the planet and ecology. So the project is, in this case, this practice is about about use of leftovers is also an homage to the radical critics of Pope Francis of consumerism and consumption in industrial society. The other half of the Vatican participation to the biennial, to the Biennale, was made by Álvaro Siza. That was as Marco already said, was my master almost 40 years ago when I was younger than you, and I went to his office in Porto. And he was doing an installation in this internal part of the convent, and we were doing the external part. The external part was to be done in this, that was a football pitch until a few years ago, and there are these 4 lawns, and the scheme was to try to find a shape to bring people across these 4 parts, going inside the vegetable garden. This is the little maquette of the project. We did the project together with the Venetian Association of Young People doing vegetable garden and social orchard and things. And they worked here for 6 months doing this, the vegetable gardening and taking the produces and doing an activity of exchange it with the school, selling of the produces on a market on the Cestiere in Venice, and we do the scheme of the whole project, and we built on the place some structures, a big pergola with a serra, with a greenhouse, a chicken pitch, another pergola, another little pavilion with an altana, with a terrace. And we discovered afterward that this shape had the shape of a fish. And you know that the fish is a very ancient symbol in ancient Christianism. But is also famously the shape of Venice itself, that is always said seeming a shape of a fish. And this shape was a fish, but was also a kind of almond, like these mystical almonds that is often in many Romanic churches or paintings. So this is a drawing for explaining where the pieces, where the components were coming from. Pieces from all around Veneto, which is the region of Venice, from demolitions, some reeds from the lagoon, some other materials from the rural parts of the internal ground, internal land of Venice, as straw and cutted branches for kind of soft paving the path. Other industrial junk like tanks for doing the foundation of the provisional structures. These are some of the places that were in demolition the weeks before the starting of our construction, and the various elements, the usual abacus of all the elements that you need if you build with salvaged materials. This is the last of the figures that compose the installation by Alvaro Siza, the 11 human figures in wood inside, and the final one in Carrara marble outside, accompanying the visitors into the vegetable garden. And this is the central pergola. A view from the first floor with a very young plantation of the vegetation. The ones that you see are already tall are the ones that are perennials and were already existing. The ones we planted grown during the running of the Biennale. The big pergola with a kind of little pavilion that was also a place where the group of Venetian growers was working with the children of the schools, with the seeds, and also a little bar in the occasion of the special events. The chicken house, the chicken were already living there in another kind of house. The other pergolas, the old structure of the chicken house that was converted into a new pergola, the little micro space for the personal there with a little altana on top. There is also a Byzantine shape window that is taken from the stone of Venice of Ruskin, and that was painted. These are the effects of the unpredictable effects of the leftovers that, of course, were planks put on top of beams, and where there were the beams, there is not the white painting. A little niche with a little angel. The inside of the micro capsule, and the fact that these leftovers that had here a second life, surprisingly at the end was a third life, because all the pavilions has been deconstructed and brought via boat to Sicily to be rebuilt, to be remounted in another garden that is in progress there, near Caltagirone, during a workshop last summer. Sorry, probably was too long, and I have finished now.
Thank you very much, Giacomo. So maybe you have some questions.
And so, first, thank you for your presentation and your work, especially on reusing the reused materials. And at the beginning of your presentation, you talked a little bit about constructing with your own hands at the same time as designing the project. So you talked much about how you designed the project, and I I'm quite interesting in how can you constructing with your hands the projects that you design.
Yes. No. The first. Sometimes probably I didn't explain very well. The first project wasn't built by us. Was built by proper carpenters. In this case, I think it was one of the few I showed here that we didn't put our hands on the yes, only to put we did a kind of celebration, a kind of party for the filling with the straw bales of the structure a weekend. This was the only part. But are you asking in general, how is this process of designing building? Of course, it's very different from when you design for a proper, normal constructor builds. You must have very clear your limits, and then if, as almost always is the occasion, this thing superpose with the other very strong limits that are represented by the fact of using leftovers. So you can't decide what you can use, or better, you must decide what to look for, because if you can't go around taking everything. So it's a kind of ping pong in which you continuously must do kind of alternate phases of a kind of initial design that serves you for having elements for starting the research of the materials. Then you find some materials and you start to modify the very initial vague idea, and again and again, until the work on the site, which is again a moment in which the project must change. It's for that is you need a quite special consultant as an engineer, because it's not common to have this thing of changing the things during the construction. Was absolutely common in popular architecture, doing with what was at hand at the moment in the time that you were going to build. So there was an art of improvisation, but is completely or almost completely forgotten. So yes, it's quite different from doing a generic project in a normal condition.
Thank you.
Buonasera, sono italiana.
Bene.
I don't ask you a question in English. I'll ask you a question in Italian first, and then I'll translate. Je repose la question en français. Je pense que ça peut être très utile pour les étudiants qui sont ici, de comprendre comment le processus du projet peut profondément changer quand on utilise des matériaux qui existent déjà, qui ont des formes, qui ont des couleurs, qui ont des mesures, et qui doivent être donc réinterprétés, réinjetés dans le projet. Je pense qu'il y a un effort de créativité et aussi un effort dans la compréhension des usages, de la multiplicité des usages qu'on pourra en faire après, et que ça change beaucoup le processus d'un projet où cette matérialité ne serait pas prise en compte.
Yes. Yes, we should need it would take a lot of time to explain in details all the specificities of this kind of projects, but one first important thing that I think I have to say is that no one of these projects has been commissioned as a project of reuse. So this is a subject that is very important, that has to do also with the method of designing, but is also has to do with the work before designing. I'm meaning the subject is try to insert some elements of reuse in the project. Try to understand what are the possibilities, what are the conditions, and so measuring this subject with all the specific conditions of every work that are the client, of course, but also the functional program, the kind of building you are doing, the regulations frame, which is very important. So I think the only way we found to deal with this thing of reuse is the maximum flexibility, is a kind of graduality that goes from little element inserted in a normal work until the 100% of a work that can be done completely with leftovers and salvaged materials. So this has very much to do with the kind of study of all the elements, and also with a kind of negotiations between the actors. That is something that I remember when I was at the university is normally not very much considered as an element of architecture. But it is a very important element, this part of dialogue between the actors of a process. So, depending from that, the factor of reuse can be an accessory one, or a kind of protagonist, the main actor of a project. And I experimented this also with my students in Mendrisio. And for them it's very, very difficult, the operation, because they are learning to design in normal condition, but adding all these limits of the two things that I was saying, the personal, the limits of their technical, practical capacity, and the limit of using this kind of fluctuant stock of things that is difficult to identify at the beginning, and is always putting yourself in a kind of difficult position. But I think it's very, very didactically is very, very important, I think, because brings at a very plastic and practical level one thing that I think is one foundation of architecture, and is one of the most neglected. And is that the project, architecture itself, doesn't come from your genius or from your mind or from your creativity. All these things can contribute a lot, of course, to the process, but it's something that is always, also when there is no reuse, but when there is reuse, this thing is more clear. Is something that starts from things that are already there. For example, there is a place that has a story, long story before, and you must remember, we hope we'll have a long story also after your project. Normally, architects, not only students, but also mature architects, think of their project as a unicum, the only thing in the history of this place. But it's not like that. And having to do with all the biographies, not only of the place, of the person involved in the work, but also the biography, the history, material stories, of all the pieces, of all the materials, of all the components. From one side is very, I think, funny, because when you write the story of a project, you can write a book of 200 pages, because the tiles are coming from the garden of this grandparent of a student. They, I don't know, handles where, I don't know, you can tell long stories about everything. And through this, you can remember that everything is something that comes from out of your, that you are not so mighty, that is not coming from your pencil. And I think it's a very good foundational element for studying architecture. What else? There are many things about this process. Of course, there are many also boring things in itself, like all these lists that you must do, all the catalogation, all the measuring of the elements, but they are very needed passages of a process that instead is also very funny. It's a good fun to work in this way. Of course, the more the project has a strong regulational frame, and the more is tough. And the more the work, of course, the work double in respect to a normal project, but of course, when you must do something that is, I don't know, a proper house with an envelope that must have some certain performance in terms of temperature and things, all these become much more complicated. But you can still do a lot of things, like a lot of people much good than us to do this are demonstrating. Like, for example, in Switzerland, that is a place where you must build following some strict principles or rules. There is this experience in the last 10 years of this office in Basel called Baubüro in situ. with this leader that is Barbara Buser, that is a fantastic organizer, and they are building buildings made 80% with discarded materials, building of 5 floors. So is a field that is still in very phase of very beginning, but we have to recover an art of building with leftovers that is been abandoned from long time.
Thank you very much, Giacomo. And
Thank you.